The action of the film begins in Paris in an old apartment, where an unnamed hired killer is at ease. The killer waits for the victim for several days, admiring the beauty of the city from the window, listening to music, doing yoga and conducting off-screen conversations. He occasionally goes outside disguised as a tourist to stock up on food and talk on the phone with his superiors. The killer warns that he will wait a couple more days, after which he will finish the operation. After the conversation, the man destroys a disposable smartphone so that no one can track the signal. Returning to the shelter, the killer examines passers-by through the prism of an optical sight in it. People seem less annoying. In the evening, a man collects a sniper rifle when he suddenly hears footsteps outside the door and the rasp of a key in the keyhole. Having intercepted the weapon, he sneaks to the entrance. The door opens slightly, and the postman lazily throws a stack of papers into the slot, after which he simply leaves. Without waiting for the target, the killer goes to sleep on a table at the window level. From time to time, he wakes up with an alarm clock to make sure that no one has entered the house opposite. In one of these awakenings, he notices the bustle of the maid, who is preparing the room for check-in. It's time to work. The killer understands and reassembles the rifle. Leveling the table to a height convenient for shooting, the killer is waiting for the object. He appears in the company of girls of low moral principles, but high financial prices. The killer carefully prepares for the shot, dropping drops into his eyes and equalizing the pulse with breathing techniques. The killer is watching through the scope lens, waiting for the right moment. Such a chance is given when a girl goes out to a client. The killer aims at the head and pulls the trigger. The bullet flies and kills the prostitute who made a careless step. Realizing that the task has failed, the killer promptly leaves the lair. Downstairs, wearing a helmet to disguise himself, he gets on a moped and drives away, trying not to meet with police cars. Driving through the streets of Paris, a man gets rid of weapons, throwing them away in different places. After driving through narrow alleys, the mercenary leaves the moped and walks, throwing his helmet into the river. In the nearest public toilet, he washes thoroughly to wash off the smell of gunpowder gases, and changes into clean clothes. Then he goes to the airport, throwing the last gun into the trash at the entrance, having previously sprayed it with a special spray. Noticing police officers with a dog near the reception desk, the man once again goes to the toilet and washes thoroughly. After registering, he calls the boss from a disposable mobile phone to get further instructions, but there are none. The killer smashes the phone in the toilet and waits for boarding. Already in the cabin of the plane, he notices a suspicious passenger in dark glasses. Later, he sees him at customs control, a very suspicious coincidence, as if they did not fly on the same flight. Noticing him again in the waiting room, the killer decides to accept the company's offer and fly out the next day in exchange for free hotel accommodation. Then he sets up sound traps from a plate and a glass so that no one enters unnoticed. He spends the night sitting in an armchair with a knife on the nightstand. Without waiting for anyone, the man goes to the Dominican Republic the next day, where he has a secret hideout on the ocean. Arriving at the address, he notices boot prints and a mountain of cigarette butts at the entrance. Someone was sitting in ambush. Grabbing a gun from the glove compartment, the killer carefully runs to the house, fearing that the uninvited guests are still waiting for him. Inside, he finds signs of a struggle and bloodstains, but does not find his girlfriend. Having learned by phone that she is in intensive care, the killer runs to the hospital. The girl's brother is sitting there, who tells everything that he managed to learn from his sister. There were two attackers, a man and a woman. Their goal was not robbery at all. The victim managed to stab the man in the leg with a knife and run into the forest. There she noticed a green taxi in which the attackers left. The killer stays with his girlfriend in the ward. The doctor says that the girl's condition has stabilized so that she can be transported to a private clinic. The killer hands the doctor the money, but she does not take it. When the girl comes to, she admits that the attackers were looking for him, but she didn't tell them anything. Immediately after that, the killer digs up a special safe in the garden full of all sorts of interesting things. He packs a suitcase with a bunch of fake documents, weapons and clean clothes, and then goes hunting. Driving around the city, the killer tracks down a green taxi. The search leads to the right taxi company, where he breaks in at night, threatening the guard with a gun. With the help of a computer, the killer learns the name of the driver who took the order during the attack. Taking the folder with his case and the money from the cash register to simulate a robbery, the man leaves. In the afternoon, he sends a package to the driver's name to find out who exactly will pick it up from the taxi company. Noticing the man, the killer later gets into his car under the guise of a passenger. During the trip, he pulls out a gun, and the taxi driver gives him his wallet, believing that this is a simple robbery. But the passenger needs information who he brought to his home. The driver tells about a couple, an elderly woman and a muscular jock. Having learned everything that is needed, the killer orders to turn under the overpass, where he coolly puts a bullet in the back of the driver's head. Then he goes to the airport, from where he flies to New Orleans under another fictitious name. There he rents a van under a different name, indulging along the way in memories of how a certain Professor Hodges convinced him to go to the dark side for money and the opportunity to kill people. In a rented van, the killer goes to one of his warehouses, where he keeps a whole arsenal and a bunch of auxiliary things, like fake license plates. The next stop on the journey is a household goods store, where he buys a trash can and other tools. Disguised as a garbage man, the killer is on duty near the office of the boss, Professor Hodges. He sees the secretary Dolores going to work. The killer enters the building disguised as a cleaner along with a courier of the postal service. Unnoticed, he walks through the door with him for a couple. On the right floor, the killer counts how many seconds the door to Hodges' office closes. When the courier leaves, he manages to grab the door and go inside. Dolores immediately recognizes him and understands with what intentions he came. The mercenary tells the woman to tie up the boss, and to fasten herself with a yoke in the restroom. The killer needs the contacts of the customer of the failed task and the killers who tried to eliminate him. Using a pneumatic hammer to hammer nails, he destroys 2 of Hodges' laptops, where data on illegal work was stored. Next, he puts 3 nails in the boss's chest, reminding him that he will die soon if he does not help. But if Hodges turns in the customer, he will still have time to call an ambulance. However, the boss holds on to the last, bleeding. When he has taken his last breath without saying anything, the killer drags the container to remove the body. Then he goes to the bathroom, where Dolores drank a pack of pills, hoping to die quickly, but miscalculated the dosage. The secretary offers him a deal: she will tell him about the customers and performers, and he will leave her alive. He agrees. They drive home with Dolores, where the killer rummages through the file cabinet until he receives 3 cards with 3 names, 2 colleagues and 1 customer. Leaving the room, the killer breaks the woman's neck in front of the stairs, simulating an accident. Then he returns to the warehouse, where he methodically cuts up Hodges' corpse, later crossing by ferry. The man carefully throws overboard a bucket with severed fingers and pulled teeth of the boss. Without them, the corpse is much more difficult to identify. He buries the body itself in a deserted place. After spending the night in a cheap motel, the killer carefully washes off all the evidence at the self-service car wash, after which he returns the car to the rental company. Under a new name, he rents another car and goes to Florida at the first of 3 addresses. Driving by, he sees the target training in the yard and training a pit bull. The killer builds a simple plan: buy ground beef, sleeping pills and a bottle of beer in the store. Then he returns to the house of the object. He dozes in the car until the evening, when friends come for the goal. After following them to the casino, the killer notices that the object is limping. A knife wound from a friend affects. After waiting for the return of the target, the killer follows to implement the plan. After waiting for a while, he goes to the fence and throws minced meat with sleeping pills over the fence to the dog. After waiting for the barking to subside, the killer goes to work. He carefully sneaks into the house, looking for a competitor, but the owner finds him before. A fight ensues, in which the firearm quickly ends up on the floor and rolls under the bed. A big guy beats up an uninvited guest to decide once and for all who the real killer is here. The killer has to run around the house fighting off with improvised objects. He almost manages to strangle the target, but he falls on his back, pinning him down with his own weight. The killer fails to defeat his target. The big guy throws him to the floor, hits him with a table and grabs a gun. By a clever trick, the killer still manages to injure the big guy. Then the killer runs into the bedroom, where he dropped his gun. He shoots through the door at a competitor and finally kills him. Then the killer makes a control shot to the head. The sound of a gunshot wakes up a sleeping pit bull. The dog starts chasing the main character, but at the last moment he manages to escape. He throws a Molotov cocktail into the house to cover his tracks, gets back in the car and drives away. The next stop is New York. In the suburbs, he tracks down a mysterious woman. Late in the evening, she leaves the house and goes to a restaurant, not noticing the pursuer with bad intentions, even when he caught up with her at the traffic light. When the victim stops at a restaurant, the killer joins her table and begins to threaten her. Realizing that it is useless to resist, the woman asks permission to taste the last dinner, which she generously dilutes with alcohol. In the process, she talks a lot, hoping to lull the vigilance of a silent vis-a-vis. Soon the killer takes the woman outside. Going down to the embankment, she suddenly falls. She holds out her hand, asking for help, but the killer shoots her in the head. When she falls, a knife is visible in her left hand. The next target is a customer in Chicago. Arriving there, the killer follows a billionaire named Claiborne to choose a plan of action. The killer enters the closed parking lot of an elite residential complex when a car leaves there to collect information about door locks. He orders an electronic key duplicator on Amazon. Then he walks past the billionaire's driver to visually assess his physical data and approximate level of training. The killer enters the fitness club where the target is engaged, and forms out a trial week of membership in one of the many names. He then contacts local gun dealers to purchase a handgun for personal use. After receiving a package from Amazon, he is preparing for a retaliation operation. On the appointed day, the killer goes to a fitness club and steals an electronic key card from an inattentive cleaner. In the locker room, he overhears a conversation between Claiborne and a personal trainer. When they go to training, the killer opens the billionaire's locker with a janitor's pass to get an electronic key to the apartment and copy it on a cheap device. After returning the key to the place, the killer leaves the fitness club. In the evening, after waiting for the gate to be opened to the food deliverer, the killer enters the elite residential complex. With the help of a copied key, he gets to the billionaire's apartment and goes to him. He is chatting on the phone, but when he sees an armed guest, he understands that it is better to stop. The killer accuses the old man that he set his colleagues on him after the failure in Paris. But Claiborne denies his involvement, saying that this is the first time he has applied for such a service and does not know how everything works. According to him, Hodges himself offered to fix everything, without specifying exactly how. Since there are no personal differences between them, the killer decides to let the customer live, but reminds that if the billionaire sends mercenaries after him, he will return and severely punish him. The killer returns to the Dominican Republic, where he lives with a friend, gradually getting used to a well-deserved pension. This is where the film ends. Thanks for your attention.